Good evening. I'd like to call to order council meeting of April 2nd, 2024. Can everyone that can stand, please stand for the playing of the national anthem.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Carton grâce et porter le paix, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Grimsby is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattaway-Wendoronk, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and the town of Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest? Seeing none, the clerk has noted an amendment to the agenda. Victoria, please go ahead.
Yes, there are 3 notices of motions that were brought forward, and they will be on after the revised agenda was published earlier today, so they'll be read at the notice of motion section on the agenda.
Councillor Frank.
I'm getting a little frustrated and concerned that of these last-minute notices of motion. We keep changing. This will be the third amendment to this agenda since day before yesterday. So I don't think, unless it's an emergency, why are we entertaining these last-minute notices of motions? I think we've got to stop this, and I want right now to deal with this before we go any further into the agenda. So can I ask that we, as council, we need to make an amendment to our rules and procedures that we only accept last-minute notice of motions on Friday noon like we used to do. Any changes to the agenda, unless it's an emergency. And I don't know if these notices of motions are an emergency or not, but if they're not, they should not be entertained at tonight's agenda. And I hope the rest of the council will comment on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't seen the notice. This is the first I heard of them, but it's a notice of motion. That's the whole point of, it's already 2 weeks or sometimes more until we actually discuss them. So I don't think that any notice is given. It needs to be given for a notice of motion unless we have a procedure for a notice of notice, but it's called the notice of motion. So I mean, somebody might tonight come up with a reason for a motion and then present the notice of motion while we speak. Now, as a council, we definitely can decide not to waive procedural and do all the other things. So we have if somebody asks to have that waived, I think that you're right in that case. We shouldn't waive it if it's something that requires thought and really a lot of detail. Sometimes a notice of motion might be something like support today's World Autism Awareness Day, for example. So if I brought forward a notice of motion to recognize World Autism Awareness Day, I don't think that would be a contentious issue that requires a lot of preparation. Yeah. So, but we might have a motion to support that or something like that. So it is a notice of motion. It's not a motion. So that's the whole point of bringing it. I think 2 weeks is sufficient, in my opinion.
Councillor Howe. Oh, sorry, Councillor DeFlavio, you weren't finished.
I was going to say perhaps the clerk would like to, because their experience might be different and might have some input on that.
Victoria?
Through the chair, I can advise our procedure bylaw says that a notice of motion may be received prior to the close of a meeting, and in this event, it shall be read and duly noted in the records without debate and shall form part of the agenda for the subsequent meeting. So at this time, you can bring forward a notice of motion. The way this is written, it should be made in writing and delivered prior to 4:30 p.m. on Wednesdays, but the way the procedure bylaw is written right now does say that it can be brought up till the end of the meeting. So if you were looking to change that, we could make an amendment to the procedure bylaw.
Can I make a notice of motion now to do that? I think that we're into the notice of motion thing. Can I make a notice of motion now to that we don't do this anymore?
Do you want to finish the conversation though?
Yeah, I think we need to finish this conversation first. So, Councillor Sharwa.
Through Mayor Jordan, thank you. So you can rest assured, it's not a contentious issue. I have 3 additional notice of motions that I have brought forward, and I will let you know. It is regarding long-term occasional care homes. The other one is about lights in parks, and the third one is about NRT. That's it. So again, I don't think we need to have a notice of motion.
Councillor Howe.
Through you, Chair, the clerk was good enough to express exactly what we've got in there, but I have to agree with Councillor Frake that, it's nonsensical that things like this pop up at the last minute. It's nice to get your head around it a little bit. I would imagine that staff have had their hands full this afternoon as they've been trying to pull this work together. And we've got to be cognizant of the staff time and allow them to organize it. So I'd be very willing to modify that to be more reflective of the proper timing.
Councillor DeVoe.
Mayor Jordan, I'm not going to take a lot of time other than to say that my fellow councillor echoed my thoughts completely. I like the part of our rules of procedure that say the notices of motion need to be in by Wednesday at the end of the day, which gives time for them to get onto the agenda, for staff not to feel rushed and pressured to make all these last-minute changes. And I would truly like to see our rules of procedure amended so that that phrase that follows after that just comes out, and that notices of motion must be submitted by the Wednesday at 4:30, I think is what it says, prior to the council meeting the next week.
All right. No, I haven't asked yet. Councillor Bradsey.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. I just wanted to make sure that we still have some procedure for the rare instance where something does need to be expedited. So just as long as we're not overlooking that.
Councillor Vardy.
Thank you. I prefer to see things on the agenda ahead of time. So I concur with two fellow councillors, DeVoley and Howe. But I also concur with Mr. Baradsey in that I think we need to have, a way that when something is time sensitive or an urgency, and I would leave that up to the discretion of the clerk to say, no, this can wait, or yes, this has to go. I'm willing to put that in the hands of the clerk to decide. not to put the pressure on you, but, I mean, that seems like a fair arbiter of, yeah, so.
Councillor Frake.
Just to add to that, let's be a bit professional here, okay? It's been over 2 weeks since we had our last council meeting. Are you telling me now that these notices of motion couldn't have been filed a week ago, 2 weeks ago, right after the last meeting? They have to be like the last minute? We have to change the agenda like twice in 24 hours? I'm sorry, I just can't comprehend that. And I think that we're more responsible than that around this council chamber, that we start changing agendas and get the staff running around the last minute, changing everything just to accommodate something we just dreamt up 24 hours ago. So if this was something that was more than 24 hours ago, then it should have been filed more than 24 hours ago. That's my thought on this. And I stand by this. And I think we should make some rules right now, tonight, and I'll make a notice of motion that we make a rule tonight that we don't accept any changes to the agenda, unless it's an emergency, before maybe Wednesday, as Councillor DeVolius suggested, because I think we know about these things long before the actual council meeting starts. So, and before the agenda, and we all know the agendas are published, usually on a Friday. So my notice of motion, or my notice of motion stands. Thank you.
I think where we're at right now, because that's been debated, it's a motion now. So you have a motion on the floor. Can Councillor Korstanji still, because we're debating this? Yeah. Councillor Korstanji.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I can understand everybody's perspective, but just to give another one is some of us work full-time. So we don't have the luxury of all the time that other people might have. So sometimes the conversations with constituents and finding out the issues and researching the issues can be a little bit difficult when I mean, we are part-time counselors. So I can understand, you know, we need to maybe tighten the procedural rules, but then we need to look at the agenda as a whole and not adjusting it at all weekend, because if we're not allowing addition of notice of motions, then we can't allow addition of delegates or other things like that. We get into a whole nother ballgame. The time change of this meeting, I don't feel, as somebody who worked, I had a lot of adequate notice to be able to change shifts and stuff like that as well. So, I mean, we're getting into a lot of different things. So just to shed another perspective that some of us don't have the time that others do to dedicate, I don't want to say that we don't dedicate the time that we need to our constituents, but it takes us longer sometimes to create motions and stuff like that.
Councillor Sharwell.
Through you, Mayor Jordan, thank you. So the two additional of the three, the one with the, regarding the lights, that was a constituent that had called me on Thursday regarding a break-in. So this was in response to a phone call that I had from that constituent. The second one was a constituent call that I got regarding the long-term care home while I was at a basketball game with my daughter. I think that was also on Thursday. So these are things that come up. So again, I work full-time as well. I did my due diligence to not only to respond to the to all of my constituents that call me, but I wanted to respond as quickly as possible. So again, these are not contentious issues. I would just like to have them read today, and we're going to debate them next week or in 2 weeks.
Councillor Vardy.
Not to belabor the discussion, but what's at issue is the timing of bringing them forward, not whether, you know, they're critical or not. And I'd say of the three that you've mentioned, I think all of those could be internal issues that could be handled, with the exception of a discussion about long-term care. But if there's a light out, that's something that our Director Wortman could look into on an urgent basis. I'm not sure, you know, that it necessarily, you know, you deal with that problem and then, bring a notice of motion if it's a broader discussion. So I think what's at issue is kind of the publishing and republishing of the agendas, as well as, and I agree with Councillor Gristangi, that, this has to follow the same rule with delegations, et cetera. So, I understand that some of us work full-time. Some of us also have very full lives outside of being a councillor, so maybe not quite as full as some others, but anyway, just something to consider. I have a full life. Do you think I just
Sorry, I think the clerk's having some IT trouble here, so I'm just going to respond to the delegation piece. The delegation deadline under a procedural bylaw is Friday, so it's not Wednesday, it's different. The deadlines are different between the notice of motion and the delegation. It's so that we do publish it on Thursday and they're able to see the full agenda and then proceed forward with requesting delegations by Friday.
Okay, I'm telling everybody.
All right, so the motion we have on the floor is resolved that the procedure bylaw be amended to remove section 7.72.
Councilor Vardy, your mic.
Sorry.
All right, resolved that the procedure bylaw be amended to remove section 7.72 and that the time-sensitive motions brought forward after the Wednesday 4:30 p.m. deadline be at the discretion of the clerk to include on the agenda. So we have Councillor Frake as a mover, Councillor Vardy as a seconder.
I have a procedural question.
All right, Councillor DeFlavio.
So the irony of dealing with this tonight is not lost on me, but wouldn't it require a notice of motion to bring this motion forward? Isn't that the whole point of this discussion? Shouldn't we be having this discussion? Actually, it shouldn't be, the notice of motion should come to the next meeting then, and we should be dealing with it a month from now, right? At the council meeting in May? If we were to follow the very procedure that you're talking about putting in place. I mean, I just don't understand. It's a notice of motion. What we're talking about is giving notice of a notice. It's kind of absurd.
No, do you mind just doing it?
CAO.
Sorry, I don't want to speak on behalf of the clerk, but if I can answer that. I think, so, yes, I understand what you're saying, but also notice of motion, we can't debate on it, but we've kind of debated on it as well at this point, so it's kind of, yes, it's a notice of motion, but you've also debated, so it's a motion, so it's kind of two-way thing.
Yeah, so I think what's happening now is once we started to debate on it and everyone had their turn debating on it, it becomes a motion.
I apologize for asking all these questions. So if I was to bring forward a notice of motion tonight, well, I couldn't do it tonight anymore if we were to pass this, but if I was to bring forward a notice of motion and I wanted it debated tonight, that motion, it would require a 2/3 majority in order to get it on the floor for discussion. But somehow, we have no notice of motion of what we're talking about right now. We've had a full discussion about it, and we are now going to vote on it? I just don't understand how procedurally that can work, because then what's the point of any notice of motion ever? I won't even bother with a notice of motion.
Well, I think procedurally, if we've debated on it and everyone's had a go around to debate on it, then it becomes a motion.
I think that the clerk should clarify that then, Your Worship, sorry, through you, because perhaps the discussion shouldn't have been allowed in the first place, but that doesn't mean that we should waive procedure just because we made an error earlier on in the meeting. And maybe if I'm wrong, I apologize. I think it's out of my realm of knowledge, so if the clerk can rule on that, perhaps, or the chair.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's because it's already happened. It's kind of, we're working backwards. Typically, this discussion shouldn't have happened. If you didn't want to proceed forward, then a point of order could have been called, right? It hasn't been called, the discussion has happened. So for us to kind of backtrack on when the discussion, that's where we're kind of in this predicament, right?
Councillor Vardy.
Yeah, if I could possibly clarify, I think we were talking about this in the context of the agenda. So the motion has arisen in the context of an item we're discussing. So wouldn't that legitimize the fact that it's a motion?
I think at this point, it's the ruling of the chair. So I think if the chair can rule.
Well, although it's quite messy, I just think now that we've discussed this and we discussed it under the order of the agenda, and we have a mover and a seconder, we can vote on it and choose to move forward on it or defeat it. So, Councillor Bradzi.
Would I be able to move that we defer this till next meeting?
Yeah, we'd have to vote on a deferral motion. Yes, he does need it. So we have a deferral motion on the floor, moved by Councillor Bradzi, second by Councillor DeFlavio. We can do a show of hands, I think, as long as everyone keeps their hands up. All in favor of the deferral? And all against the deferral? So that has been defeated. So now we have the motion, moved by Councillor Frake, second by Councillor Vardy. Resolved that the procedural bylaw be amended to remove section 7.72 and that time-sensitive motions brought forward after Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. deadline will be at the discretion of the clerk to be included on the agenda. All in favor? And that has passed. All right, now we need a mover and seconder to approve the agenda as amended. Moved by Councillor Howe, second by Councillor Frake. Moved by Councillor Howe, second by Councillor Frake. Resolved that the April 2nd, 2024 council meeting agenda be approved as amended. All in favor? That's carried. All right, we'll be moving into closed session for an education and training session on cybersecurity. Open session will resume at hopefully 6:30 p.m., but it might be 6:45. You need a full hour, don't you? Yeah, our IT team needs a full hour, so we're going to resume. I'm going to give you 55 minutes, so we'll resume at 6:50. Right, need a mover and seconder to go into closed. Moved by Councillor Bradzi, second by Councillor Vardy. Moved by Councillor Bradzi, second by Councillor Vardy. Resolved that council meet in closed session under section 239311 of the Municipal Act, which states a closed session meeting is held for the purpose of educating or training the members specifically regarding an education and training session for cybersecurity. All in favor to go into closed? That's carried. All right.
So we met on the 4th of March. There was no disclosures of interest. We received 3 sets of minutes, 2 from the BIA downtown for January 22nd, February 2nd, and 1 for the previous corporate services meeting of February the 5th. We had no delegations. We had 1 discussion report, which was based on the short-term rental bylaw, which we discussed at great length at council a number of months ago. So it's finally gone through. To tell tonight. We had a verbal update on cybersecurity from Philip, which we again had tonight in greater depth. And that was pretty much it for the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Frake. Up next, we have Councillor DeFlavio for Public Works.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. First, we had the 2023 Annual Drinking Water System Municipal Summary Report. According to the law, the town is required to prepare an annual summary report for drinking water systems and communicate it to council, so it was done through the committee. We, as a municipality, have to identify specific regulatory requirements, identify total amounts of water used by the system during the previous year, those types of things. The report indicated that in 2023, the town met all of its regulatory obligations, and the license and permit to operate the system remains in good standing. Next, we had a report regarding the 2023 In-Road Flexible Signage Pilot Program. For those, to refresh people's memory, we had 12 different locations throughout the town where we put up, where staff put up flexible signage to, as a traffic calming measure. There were the in-road bollards and things. The report indicated that it was a successful program. It did reduce speeds, immediately reduced speeds considerably, but even in the long run had a positive effect, a downward effect on speeds in different areas. Staff are preparing to continue the program for a 3rd year in 12 different locations. Again, the locations are currently under investigation and are going to be presented to the Public Works Committee in the near future. The final report was the annual Drinking Water Quality Management System Infrastructure Review. Similar to the previous water report that I talked about, the town's required to complete a review on the state of the drinking water system infrastructure and communicate the results to council. This was as a result of Walkerton. You might remember that there were a lot of changes made to the Safe Drinking Water Act in 2002. There are all kinds of requirements, but the town passed the review. Our drinking water system is adequate, and all of that information, the specifics, are available in the report. Under new business, there were a couple of things that were brought up. We were asked for an update on the Transportation Master Plan and Downtown Reimagined project. Mr. Wortman, the Director of Public Works, informed the committee that they had selected a consultant for the Transportation Master Plan. That will be communicated to council in the next few weeks. And RFPs are hopefully coming forward soon. Councillor Howe made a request about the inflow and infiltration study, which was then sent out, I think, to council the next day by Marvin. And Member Rady brought up the concern about there was the speed reduction on Roberts Road to 40 kilometers an hour. There was some concerns that there would be traffic diverted to Garden Drive. So staff have been asked to look at the impact on parallel roads to Roberts Road, and if there has been any impact, and that will be coming forward in the near future. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor DeFlavio. Up next, we have Councillor Charwa for the Community Services Committee.
Through Mayor Jordan. So we had 3 items. We had met on March 26th, and 3 items to mention. The first one was regarding approval of a report on establishing an art gallery special purpose advisory committee. This was basically a committee that needed to be formed in order to access grants, and the requirement is minimal as far as investment. I think 4 times a year is the proposed amount of times they're gathering. So that was the first item. The second item, I had brought forward a motion for seeking shoreline protection measures. So this motion was to potentially slow the erosion of our shoreline at Nellis Beach Park, Whitaker Park, and Murray Park. And I asked for an update to council about potential cost grants, grants available, and money from parkland reserves that can be used for funding for these strategic investments. So at this point, I believe we're going to get a report back on that to council. And the third one had to do with a delegation. Actually, it wasn't a delegation. It was a presentation from Public Works Manager Thomas Hodgson regarding a public tree bylaw. It was carried by our committee under the assumption, or I guess there was a bit of miscommunication as far as what the Grimsby Green Advisory Committee had approved, and there's still some work to be done as far as meeting in the middle. So my understanding after we had approved this was that there was a miscommunication, and the Grimsby Green Advisory Committee is going to come back to council, and hopefully we can work on something where there's a middle ground. So at this point, I believe Bruce McKenzie will be coming to council to delegate on this to council, possibly in a few weeks. So that's where this was left.
Thank you, Councillor Shawa. Up next, we have Councillor Bradzi for the Planning and Development Committee. I was unable to make it, and I heard you did a really good job, so let's hear about it.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I was happy to fill your shoes briefly. We had a well-attended open house regarding an application for a proposed zoning amendment and an official plan amendment on the North Service Road. We heard a wide variety of opinions from councillors, committee members, and the multitude of residents that came out. Rather than getting into the details of the proposal at this time, I think it's important for us as a council to have a conversation on this. But otherwise, it was good to see a good turnout, and it's always nice to hear from a lot of residents.
Thank you, Councillor Bradzi. Up next, Councillor DeVoldy for the Finance Committee.
Mayor Jordan, the Finance Committee met on Thursday, March 28th, 2024, which was really just 3 business days ago. So our clerk's department always does a great job of quickly putting the minutes together, and that is one of the reasons for the amendment to the agenda, as it's pretty much a late-minute adjustment always to our agenda of council that follows the meeting of finance. At the meeting of finance, in addition to the usual sort of approvals, we had 2 consent reports that we did not discuss in detail, and that was the summary of the 2023 tax write-offs and continuity schedule and report of the 2023 Development Charge Reserve Fund statements. So they were reviewed, and basically the committee members did not have any questions. The reports that did come and that the committee inquired about in more detail had to do with our 2023 annual building permit fee report, and that is mandatory, that it must always come to a council, and in our case, through our Finance Committee. And that was approved by the committee, and also the recommendation is that this be made publicly available on our website. The second report that was discussed in some detail had to do with our 2023 portfolio investments. And it was a review, basically, that summarized how our investments did in the last year. The committee would really like to review the investment policy and to meet with the new investment advisor, and so that will be set up and on our agenda going forward. The last report, 4 reports in total. The third report was the 2023 Statement of Remuneration and Expenses for Members of Council and Council Appointments, and this is a mandatory report as well that must come to council and then becomes public information. So that was reviewed with some questions and then approved. And the fourth report was the staff memorandum that will be coming to us on a regular basis. So this was our first report having to do with the Peach King Center expansion. And basically, at this point, there have been no amendments in terms of cost to the project. We are still very much at the design stage, and so things are progressing as expected, I will say. And that report was approved as well. Under correspondence, we also reviewed the water system financial plan update, which actually was done at Public Works. But it was such an excellent study and update that I asked that it come to our Finance Committee, and so that was shared with them. And the second thing that we wanted to update our members on at Finance was we actually have a work plan where we laid out our terms of reference and the months in which we would be addressing the various items in our job description, I will call it that. And so we brought that forward so committee members could see where we are in our work plan. And then the last item that was approved by the committee was to regretfully accept Councillor Baradzi's resignation from our Finance Committee and to appoint Councillor Howe to our committee in lieu of Councillor Baradzi, and that was carried. And that concludes our report.
Thank you, Councillor DeVole. Up next, can I get a mover and seconder to approve the previous minutes? Councillor Vardy?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to lift the community services meeting. Item, let's see now, 5.6A, with respect to the tree bylaw.
All right, that's so noted. Need a seconder? Councillor Frake? Moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Frake. Resolved that CS 20, is that the right number? 24-016, Community Services Minutes of March 26, 2024 be lifted for separate consideration. Everyone, all in favor?
We do a separate motion for the
Yeah.
next one.
This is the first one. Voting on lifting that? All right, that's carried. All right, Councillor Vardy?
Thank you. I just would like to see this come back to the Grimsby Green Advisory Committee one more time before it gets forwarded on to council, because we still have some concerns with it in some of the languages, in some of the language of it. So we'd like to have one more stab at it before it moves forward.
So you want a deferral motion?
Yeah, I'd like a deferral motion.
Yeah, yeah. If this is a deferral motion, there's no discussion on it. It's just deferred back to the Green Committee. So,
Thank you.
I have moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Frake, resolved that report CRS 24-016 be deferred back to the Grimsby Green Committee. All in favor? That's carried. All right, Councillor Sharwa, you want to lift something?
I'd like to lift the finance minutes, specifically the Grimsby Economic Development Advisory Committee minutes.
Item 5.2. Seconder? Councillor Corstangi? Moved by Counselor Sharwa, second by Counselor Korsanji. Resolved that item 5.2 from the Finance Committee minutes of March 28, 2024 be lifted for separate consideration. All in favor to lift? 5. Okay, so that's carried. Can I see the hands to lift it again? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5. All right, so that's carried. All right, Counselor Sharwa.
Through you, Mayor Jordan, thank you. Just a question. First, a comment. I don't know if this is just an error, but when we're approving the minutes from Finance, we did get the Grimsby Economic Development Advisory Committee minutes, like, to come to Finance, but then now that they're coming to Council, it wasn't attached with this. So I'm just wondering if, just to make, for ease of, council members, just to be able to access it, that it comes directly with that attachment? Is that just an error? Okay. The minutes for GDAC came to Finance, but they didn't actually come to this attachment to Council. So I'm just wondering if that was just an error, if we can continue to include it with our Council minutes, not just Finance, so that we have all of the minutes. Is that?
Through the chair, if I'm understanding correctly, any of the advisory committee minutes go on the standing committee agenda, and the standing committee minutes go on the council agenda. So historically, GDAC would not be on the council agenda, it would only be on the standing committee agenda.
Okay, I get that. Yes, for the attachment, it's fine. Yes, I'll look for it, but it's just for ease. It's just a matter of if everybody, because if you're not looking for it, then you won't have all the items. And so I noted in item 10, there was the second Community Development Roundtable follow-up breakfast, March 20th. Appreciated that there were some changes to this. So it mentions here what the objective is. The objective is to have these types of events biannually so they can be responsive to development happening in Grimsby. Appreciated that we received an email from our EDO who invited everybody to come. I'm just wondering what some of those changes were from the first event to the second event, including how we got around having an open invite, so all the councillors were actually allowed to attend. So if you can just, because I did thank Frank for the openness on the second one, I'm just wondering if you can clarify the changes.
Counselor Frick, do you want to speak on that?
Sure. Well, openness might be the wrong word, because the first one was open, but it was an actually event, which was a roundtable work session event. The feedback we got from the attendees at that event and the suggestions by staff as a result of the feedback was presented at the second event, and it was open. I think six out of our 9 councillors were in attendance at that. So that was, of course, it was open because we wanted to give the feedback, the questions that came out of the original one, and the feedback from staff to the feedback, and that's what that session was. And it was open to the people that attended, obviously, who attended the first one, the staff who were involved in the first one. So that's the difference between the two. One was an event, was a work session event. The second was a feedback from the event. I don't know if that answers your question. You're welcome.
Counselor Howe.
Through you, Chair. I'd like to lift another item out of the community services. If we haven't closed it off, we've responded to the one lift. And that'd be for the CS 24019. That's having to do with the shoreline. Shall I?
Moved by Counselor Howe, seconder, Counselor DeVoli. Moved by Councillor Howe, seconded by Councillor DeVoley. Resolved that CS 24-019 from the Community Services minutes of March 26th, 2024 be lifted for separate consideration. All in favor to lift? That's carried. Councillor Howe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And I guess it's mechanics, but if we've put something in this that in fact is being already covered with previous projects, our project details, for instance, we've got project detail 01-300012 shoreline protection assessment from 23. That work was done in the fall. Mr. Workman probably correct me. They have received the report from the consultant, and it has just recently got to Public Works, but it just seems that we're redundancy. And also the Whitaker is well addressed in another project, which is 02-655002, which talks at length about Whitaker and the issues there and what's going to have to be done, but it's a matter of getting it done. But just, you know, I should have caught it then, but, you know, it seems like it's a duplication of work that's going on. What do we do? Yep.
Sarah, would you want to speak to that to see if some of these projects are already being done?
02-655-002 is the project number.
Sure, through the mayor, happy to speak to it. So the intention, as I understood it from the ask, was just that we give a bit of an update to committee and then council as well on those two projects as to where they stand and where we're intending to do the work. So there has been some previous shoreline work done, and then there was some additional work done by Public Works as well, and all of that is being weaved into the same projects. And then, of course, there are actual capital projects speaking specifically to some of these items too. So our intention was to come back with that information so that committee has an understanding of kind of how we are planning to progress through this work and the timing.
Great. Does that clarify that for you, Councillor Howe? Okay. All right, we need a mover and seconder to approve the previous minutes. Moved by Councillor DeFlavio, second by Councillor Howe. Moved by Councillor DeFlavio, second by Councillor Howe. Resolved that the following minutes be approved. Corporate Services Committee, March 4th, 2024. Council, March 18th, 2024. Public Works Committee, March 25th, 2024. Community Services Committee as amended, March 26th, 2024. Planning and Development Committee, March 27th, 2024. And Finance Committee, March 28th, 2024. All in favor? That's carried. All right, up next we have the Committee of Adjustment from March 19th, 2024. Can I get a mover and seconder to receive the Committee of Adjustment minutes? Moved by Councillor Howe, second by Councillor DeFlavio. Moved by Councillor Howe, second by Councillor DeFlavio. Resolved that the Committee of Adjustment minutes dated March 19th, 2024 be received. All in favor? That's carried. Announcements. Are there any announcements this evening? Councillor Vardy.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. On last Thursday, I attended the Liuna Employer Recognition event, And while there, I met with the executives of LiUNA as well as the Minister of Labor, Mr. Piccini. And it was a great event. There were, I'd say a couple hundred people in attendance. And I saw the LiUNA facility, which was really, really impressive. And it was a great event. And in speaking with the Minister of Labor, he appreciated what Grimsby is doing and its partnership with LiUNA and the other areas in which we want to work. So it was a very positive event, very, very well done, and I have to say a really impressive facility. And this Thursday, I will be attending on your behalf the opening of the renovated Sobeys at 7:30 in the morning, and I look forward to doing that. So I'll let you know how that event goes, but if anyone would like to join me, love to see you there. It's at 7:30 a.m. Thank you.
I can give you a wake-up text. So. Any other announcements? Councillor DeVoldy.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I'm not so sure how much attention people paid, but the province of Ontario did come out with their Ontario budget for 2024. Unfortunately, predicting a deficit for the year of close to $10 billion. A number of things they announced, of course, I have not seen any details on yet, but one that stood out was they are promising an ability, the promising municipalities the ability to reduce property taxes on new not-for-profit housing and so on. Of course, I haven't been able to find any details out on that yet, and I don't know if our staff have seen any details on that yet, but a number of changes, and just wanted to remind everybody that some of those changes do affect us as municipalities, so please, if you would like some websites where you can read about the summaries of it, happy to share those.
Thank you, Councillor DeVoldy. Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, today is Autism Awareness Day, April 2nd of every year, World Autism Awareness Day. I have had the good fortune and honor of working with kids with autism since I was about 15 years old. And the spectrum is a real one, and it's the effect on families and classes is real. I would encourage people to learn about people on the spectrum, people with autism. Encourage your members of provincial parliament to fund autism programs throughout the province, because the things that are happening in school are things that affect all of us, and so I just wanted to bring some attention to that today, because it is, we hardly ever have a meeting on this specific day, April 2nd, in all the years that I've been on council, and since I had the chance to bring it forward, I wanted to remind people about Autism Awareness Day today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flavio. Councillor Bradsey.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. I just wanted to make an announcement that if anybody had an inkling of watching the Niagara Falls Council meeting next Tuesday, we'll get to see the mayor donning a Grimsby Peach King jersey. So, just wanted to announce that. My friendly wager was successful.
So you couldn't get him to wear it at regional council? Oh. Yeah. Well, I'll talk to him on Thursday. All right, seeing no further announcements, I have a couple. I'm happy to attend on Thursday the grand opening of the West Niagara High School. That's coming up on Thursday. And if we don't all know it yet, the solar eclipse is coming up on Monday, March 8th. And with us being yes. Been talking about it for 2 years, so I better get the date right, Monday, April 8th. And we are in the path of totality, and I just want to thank the town of Grimsby and Dr. Peaker for providing glasses, which we are officially out of now, unfortunately. But it will be something that in this area, we won't be able to see it for another 120 years, so none of us will be here to see that. And that's just everyone, only look at the sun if you have the proper protection. All right, I see no further announcements. So we will move to consent reports, PA 24-08. Can I get a mover and seconder to approve the consent report? Moved by Councillor Bradzi, seconder Councillor Korstanji. Moved by Councillor Bradzi, second by Councillor Korstanji. Resolved that council hereby approves the following item, and the consent item be approved on the recommendation as contained therein. PA 24-08, that report PA 24-08, Council Direction Report, 19 Mountain Street and 7 Kervin Avenue, dated April 2nd, 2024, be received, and the council proceed with the passing of the designation bylaws for the property at 19 Mountain Street and 7 Kervin Avenue. All in favor? That's carried. Up next, we have Councillor DeFlavio's resolution, financial implications of integrity commissioner investigations. Can I get a seconder to get this on the floor for discussion? Councillor Sharwa. Discussion, Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the resolution or the motion speaks for itself. I think it's important that we understand that every time there's an integrity commissioner complaint, that there is quite a cost associated with it. Having read our clerk's memo, I'm willing to revise the motion to state that a report come quarterly to council on costs rather than with each integrity commission report. If the fear is that as the memo states, that it acts as a disincentive to people who are making complaints, I don't want members of the public to not feel like they can make an integrity commissioner's complaint. What I want is for members of council to understand that when we make a complaint, rather than kind of ironing things out ourselves, there's a cost associated with it, and we make decisions all the time based on finance. I think it's important that we understand the cost of these complaints. So if it means a quarterly report that says, or bi-yearly, but I don't think that July of 2024, as recommended in the clerk's memo, is adequate. And the reason why is because it's 6 months after the end of year end. Information is only relevant when it's recent. And 6 months after the year end is concluded doesn't really give us enough of an indication of what the cost of those integrity commissioners' complaints were. So I would rather see that happen quarterly. I am under the assumption that our staff is keeping a record of all the financial transactions that are made by the town. And so it should only be a matter of saying between January and March 31st of 2024, we spent X number of dollars on X number of complaints. And then we could just do the math ourselves. If there are 3 complaints and it costs $50,000, we could say each complaint costs $50,000 divided by 3, roughly. It doesn't have to be an exact amount if that's what the fear is. But I do think it's important that people understand the cost. So if people want me to change it to a quarterly report of the cost of the integrity commissioner, I would consider that a friendly amendment. But I also think it's fine the way that it's written. So I'm happy to answer any other questions.
The clerk's going to speak on it now.
Thanks. Through the chair, I just wanted to provide some additional context. So the report that in my memo that I speak about is something that the Integrity Commissioner that's appointed for the town does annually and is included in the services he provides to us. So this would be, the report is done by the Integrity Commissioner, not by staff. So that would be and so if it was to be done quarterly, that would be an additional service that we'd need to speak to him about, and whether his office can accommodate that, and if there's any additional fees or resources. And yes, staff do track our, when an application is submitted, but beyond that, it goes to the Integrity Commissioner. So we aren't kept up to date on the process or the billing until that is complete. I'm not sure if the CAO wanted to comment on anything else, but that was, okay.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you. So, then it's very clear. We pay a bill and we know how much that bill is. I don't know why we need to wait for the Integrity Commissioner to tell us what bill we paid 6 months later when we're paying that bill as soon as it's submitted to the town of Grimsby. I'm confused as to why we would need to wait for the Integrity Commissioner to tell us how much the Integrity Commissioner has charged us when we know what that amount is on an ongoing basis.
Victoria?
Through the chair, thanks for the comments. I think we received the invoice, but the additional information that's provided in the annual report, such as how many complaints there are, what it was for, would still be not outlined in that. It wouldn't state how. It would just say the invoice number, the date, and how much the invoice is. Ooh, I don't need to hear my voice that many times. Okay. Sorry. Thanks. So that's how the annual report is written, with the invoice date, the number of invoices, and then he provides a little summary of how many investigations he did, how many educational sessions he did. So we would still be looking to the Integrity Commissioner to complete that, and it would be based on when the invoices come in, I guess.
Councillor Barty.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Mayor. You know, in looking at this, I could agree with like a biannual report. You know, so with whatever invoices we have up until that point. I take the comments of the clerk quite seriously that, you know, and in terms of this could put a chill on making complaints. But at the same time, with every complaint, there's an alleged perpetrator and a complainant, right? So responsibility is on both parties, not just the complainant. And I guess when issues come up, and sometimes, you know, if things are minor, yes, I think we should talk to each other and work them out. But sometimes, you know, the trespass is more egregious. And if it affects your, you know, your reputation, that's the only recourse you have. You know, because as I said before, once the words are out, they're like concrete. They're down, they're hard, they're there forever. And, you know, unless you have a way to either redeem yourself or accept responsibility, if you're not redeemed, you know, there's nothing to control people's bad behavior if we choose to be bad. I mean, it's the only recourse we have, and I wouldn't want there to be a chill to make people feel like, well, you know, if I file a complaint, it's going to cost the town money, when in fact, you know, you're being forced into a situation where potentially it's the only way to defend yourself. As I say, some small things can be worked out, but I think we as councillors and people who are seen in the public, you know, have a right to publicly defend ourselves if an accusation is made against one of us that we feel is unfair. So, you know, while I get the accountability that we want to know how much it costs should really be an indicator of bad behavior. And if there's a lot of complaints, then there's a lot of bad behavior, because I don't think anyone makes spurious complaints or just vexatious complaints. I mean, no one goes to the trouble of putting out $200 just because they were a little bit miffed or didn't like a comment. So I think it's really important that we have this mechanism because it's a way of being very transparent about our behavior.
Councillor Frake.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jordan. I won't go, I think that Victoria answered some of my questions, but I did some research across Niagara, and there are 4 other municipalities that only do annual reports, they being St. Catharines, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Niagara Falls, and Welland. They all do annual reports, and doesn't seem to be a problem. We've always done annual reports, never seems to be a problem. I don't know why we're all of a sudden deciding to do it twice a year. That in itself has got to cost some kind of money, doing it twice rather than once. So, but I have no problem if that's where council wants to go, fine. I mean, biannual is fine. But I think are we just changing the rules for the sake of changing the rules? Or are we, again, like Councillor Vardy said, will it put a bit of a damper on people in the community thinking that, well, the councillors have gone wild and they're costing us all this money. Well, sometimes we have legitimate complaints. And I don't think we should forget that. And, it's not just one party, it's 2. Anyways, if that's where you want to go, with, biannually, fine, but I don't think it's necessary, but we're spending a lot of time on it, even here tonight. But and I thank Victoria for giving us some of the answers that I had. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Jordan.
Councillor Flavio.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. So the goal is always, of course, transparency. Our clerk mentioned previous or the annual reports, but when I go to the Town of Grimsby website and I do a search for Integrity Commissioner, I can't find those reports. They're not easy to find. They're not easily accessible. So a report is only as good as its availability. And what I'm trying to do is bring more transparency to the process. And that means that we actually understand the cost of this thing. When council put an Integrity Commissioner in place during the last session of council, and I think it's an important part of the council process, having an Integrity Commissioner, I'm sure that cost was discussed. But there is no relationship between what a complaint is and what that costs from our perspective. So we don't understand the cost of the Integrity Commissioner. I mean, maybe others do. And if you do, please teach me. But I don't understand the cost of an Integrity Commissioner. And that was why I brought this motion forward, was because I think that if I don't understand it, then the public certainly doesn't understand the cost of what an Integrity Commissioner complaint is. And so that's why I brought the motion forward in the first place.
Thank you, Councillor DeFlavio. And just a point of clarification that, yes, council put it in place, but it was legislated by the province to put in place, so we didn't have a choice. All councils, all 441 municipalities had to appoint an Integrity Commissioner. Any further discussion? Councillor DeVoldy.
Mayor Jordan, some additional thoughts just to share with my fellow councillors. So outside of this room, I do sit on another committee at the provincial level that handles complaints. And it's interesting because you can well imagine a committee of accountants is always interested in costs. And even at that level, the actual amount of costs is not shared with the committee members, the costs of investigations, the costs of legal counsel, and so on. In an effort to do just what was said in the report, to encourage people to come forward and to launch complaints when they need to be. And sometimes the complaints end up nowhere and the cases are closed. And sometimes they go all the way to discipline and people lose professional designations. So very serious, but amazingly enough, at that level, the actual details are never shared with the committee members. So from that perspective, am I interested in costs? Absolutely. If an annual report is coming from our integrity commissioner, I think it's good if it comes to council and even is part of our agenda and part of our reports and then is very public at that point in time. I do have some concerns that people may feel they shouldn't be bringing these things forward, especially if we're getting reports on a quarterly or semi-annual basis, that it's too easy to equate the case to the costs that way. If there's only, imagine a case where there's only one or two, how easy is it to look at this report and go, that was Councillor so-and-so or whatever, right? And so that doesn't encourage disclosure and doesn't encourage preventing bad behavior. And so I think I actually have landed with the clerk's recommendation that annually is fine, but I would like it to be a public report, attached to our minutes and shared with the public when we do get it from them.
So are you putting forward an amendment to make it annually, like to change this resolution?
No.
Through the chair, the current motion on the table is Councillor DeFlavio's notice of motion. So any changes would need, or if you wish to go with what was in the motion, in the memo, would require an amendment.
May I clarify? So the current resolution is that this would be done on, it would be in addition to actually what the Integrity Commissioner is giving us. And it would be how often then, just to clarify? Quarterly. After each case.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, I'm just reading the motion. It says, the last paragraph says, be it further resolved that the Finance Department memo be prepared and submitted along with the Integrity Commissioner investigation report to council. So that would be after each case, right? Yeah.
Councillor Bradzi.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. So if I were to call a question now, a no vote would be to stay as is, which is the yearly reports, which we currently have. Okay, yeah.
That's correct.
My opinion is that I think we need to trust the process, and I'd like to call a question.
All right, the question has been called. Moved by Councillor DeFlavio, second by Councillor Charwa. Whereas the town of Grimsby is committed to transparency and accountability in its governance, whereas Integrity Commissioner investigation reports play a crucial role in maintaining ethical standards within municipal government, whereas it is essential for the town council and the public to have a clear understanding of financial impact of Integrity Commissioner investigations on the taxpayers. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Grimsby Council hereby approves the inclusion of Finance Department memo upon the completion of every Integrity Commissioner investigation report presented before Council. Be it further resolved that the Finance Department memo shall include a detailed breakdown of the costs associated with the investigation, including but not limited to legal fees, administration expenses, and any other relevant expenditures. Be it further resolved that the Finance Department memo be prepared and submitted along with the Integrity Commissioner investigation report to Council and made available to the public through the Town of Grimsby website. Be further resolved that this motion shall take effect immediately upon approval. I think we'll vote on e-scribe on this. All right, so that's defeated. Up next, we have a motion by Councilor Vardy to establish a microforest on town property in honor of Earth Day. Councilor Vardy.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I know you've all read the motion, so what I'd like to do is to have Grimsby be a leader in this regard and sort of set the tone. A microforest only requires about the space of a tennis court, and we have lots of land available where we could do this. It doesn't have to be a actual tennis court. It could be long and not too wide, or, there's lots of ways that you can do it, and we do have land, and I think that it would be great if we could, approve this motion in advance of April 22nd, which is Earth Day. Now, it would probably take a year to get this all together, so I'm not expecting that, in 2 weeks' time, we're all going to be digging trees. There's the land remediation or at least checking the land, and I think we need to get some expertise because these are sort of unique mini forests, which because of their particular biodiversity, they grow to their full forest size in 2 to 3 years. And I think it would be great, personally, but it could be anywhere, but if we had one on town property where we could have a kind of a dirt trail going through, so it's not hampered, and maybe some signage on trees, so it can be part of an educational event. So maybe if we had it here at Town Hall, which I would love, we could, it would be another thing that kids could do with their parents, just take a quick walk through the forest, and hopefully we'd be setting the example for other, say, businesses in the area that could also bring in a microforest, because we do have some businesses, particularly on South Service Road, that have a lot of land that could be put to use. And I've recently spoken with someone from the Vineland Research, and they're doing research right now on the carbon capture of microforests, and they would be a great partner for us to have that as part of what we're doing. So, and we might even be able to, set the example for all of Niagara. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or.
Councillor Davoli, then Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I don't know if Councillor Vardy can answer this, and then I will have a second question. And I'm not saying we wouldn't do this because of my question, but do we have any idea that if we own the land, what the cost of this might be?
Well, I can tell you if we own the land, there isn't a cost because we already own it. It would be just the cost of trees and various shrubs. And we do have within several of the budgets, within our budget, the ability to direct some of those funds to these areas. So, given the small size of it, and given that we have some areas like, if I just sort of say behind us here, for example, there's on the hill, there's already some trees out there that, could potentially, we could use that space or some other space that already has some trees incorporated. So, I think it's kind of a win-win proposition for us, and we would be a leader.
My second question, if I
I was
could.
going to comment on
Okay.
that one to start.
I mean, Sarah can add on, but we would also look at partnerships such as Vineland Research to see if we can do this together in collaboration as well.
And if I could add also the Canada Trees, Billion Trees, I mean, there's lots of sources of grant funding, so.
My second question actually was to Director Sweeney, because and Councillor Vardy made reference to it, but I believe we actually had some monies in your particular budget for tree planting, and perhaps in Public Works, I'm not sure, but I recall when we went through the budget, people talking about this. Perhaps you could just elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, happy to, through the chair. So we do have funds in our budget for tree planting, tree maintenance. Ours focuses more on parks and open space, and then Public Works would focus more on the street trees and such things. So there certainly is some budget that we could look to put towards this, but as was mentioned, there's also partnership opportunities. We've had some great successes with NPCA, for example, with partnerships, Vineland Research there could be, and then there are other projects we think that we keep coming forward too. So there's a variety of different streams. I don't think it would have to be an overly costly project, as you said, and we've actually had staff already start to identify a couple of different location options, so happy to work on this project.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Councillor DeVoli already discussed some of the questions I had related to financing of it. There's also, I mean, TD does an annual planting. There are lots of organizations. I was going to mention that if you need any black walnuts, the squirrels around my house plant them in all of my planters, and then when I bring them inside, they sprout inside my house. So I have a dozen that you can have right now from the plants inside my house. But all joking aside, my house is an escarpment lot, and trees sprout up. And then if they can't find the light, will die naturally. So I would be happy to transplant some of those if it saves money. And I've got another lot that is an escarpment lot as well, where that same thing. I'm not an expert on trees, so I would need an expert like the ones we have in the crowd today to identify those trees and what would be native species and stuff. But I think it's a great idea. Finding the right location, I think, is important, because we don't want to plant something that later we are worried about having to tear down because it's a site that we need to build on. So finding the right spot, I'll trust staff will do that for us. But yeah, it's a great idea.
It is like making a little mini park or a park within a park. So, there's lots of opportunity.
Councillor Frake.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. It's good to see that we have some very good supporters of this in the audience tonight as well. So, yeah, Councillor DeFlavio and Councillor Barty and Councillor DeVoli has mentioned some of the things. I had the occasion to be at the beaches last weekend during the birdhouse sale, bird and bee house sale. I'm sure most of us were down there. And I spoke with some of the residents down there, and they have accumulated a pretty good pot of money, and they want to put that money into a microforest. And they've identified a piece of property actually right on the corner of Lake and Betts, I think it is. It's a piece of property owned by the town or the MTO, maybe Walter can confirm that. And they're quite prepared to take that property, wrap their arms around it, plant a microforest, and fund it. So there's a start right there. So, and there, I know there are other potential financial supporters out there as well, and I think that we have some money in the budget, so we probably could do a good job at this. And we could become one of the leaders, at least in the Niagara region. So I certainly endorse it, and I think it's a great idea.
All right, seeing no further discussion, moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Frake, whereas Earth Day serves as a reminder of our collective responsibility to protect and preserve the environment for future generations, and whereas microforests, also known as mini urban forests or pocket forests, have been proven to provide numerous environmental benefits, including carbon sequestration, biodiversity enhancement, and urban heat island mitigation. And whereas Grimsby Town Council has a commitment to environmental sustainability and has thoroughly reviewed and endorsed this initiative, recognizing its alignment with the town's sustainability goals and objectives, therefore be it resolved that Grimsby Town Council initiate the establishment of microforest on town property to commemorate Earth Day, and be it further resolved that town staff be directed to identify suitable locations for the microforest, develop a planting plan in consultation with relevant stakeholders, and seek necessary funding and support for the project. All in favor? That's carried. Up next, we have Councillor Vardy for microforest on the new water reservoir in Grimsby up on Upper Park Road. Councillor Barty?
So a couple years ago, before the reservoir opened, I guess it was about 2 years ago, we all took a tour. Several of us went on a tour to see the water reservoir and the lands around it. And it was very much in its new stage. There was no water in the reservoir and, ground was rough. But they did at that time have a budget for landscaping. Now, I know they have grass there, but if there are funds in that budget for landscaping, it's another ideal place that we could, put in another little microforest, and for something that's already been budgeted for. So I would like for this motion to be taken to the region, to have the region decide if that's a possibility at that site. Because it's in Grimsby, but it is a regional property.
Okay, so we just need a friendly amendment to say that the resolution be forwarded to the Niagara region.
Can I get a point of clarification? If the last motion, we directed staff to look for locations to do a microforest, would that not make the second one redundant? I'm not saying that. I think it'd be a great location and one we consider.
I think that this is on regional land because and we're looking at another one on Town of Grimsby lands, or multiple ones on Town of Grimsby lands for that matter.
Does it really need its own motion? Is my question? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think
I'm not objecting.
it's just given because it's regional land, so it's a whole different level. So it has to be approved at regional council. That's why we're amending.
Sorry, can we also add, through you, Mr. Chair, to have some flexibility for our town staff to be also included? Because I think the Bruce Trail is there, and we would like that door open for us for access points and other things. So if we can work together with the region, I think that would kind of help our staff.
I would anticipate that staff would be involved in all of this, so I have no issue with that whatsoever. So if you want to amend it to involve our staff, yes.
All right, so we'll tweak the resolution administratively, and because there is potential of a side trail off the Bruce Trail to this in time, so.
We'll take that back and amend it before we send it to the
Perfect.
region.
All right, moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Frank, whereas microforests, also known as mini forests or Miyawaki forests, have been proven to be highly successful in restoring degraded land, enhancing biodiversity, and sequestering carbon. And whereas these dense, diverse ecosystems grow rapidly and can reach maturity in a fraction of the time it takes for traditional forests to develop, and whereas by harnessing the power of microforests, we can effectively combat deforestation, mitigate the impacts of climate change, and create healthier, more resilient communities, and whereas as stewards of our environment, it is our responsibility to take proactive measures to safeguard our natural resources and promote ecological resilience, and whereas by investing in the creation of a microforest, we not only fulfill our commitment to environmental sustainability, but also foster a sense of community pride and engagement, and whereas this motion is fully supported by the Town of Grimsby's Green Advisory Committee, further underscoring the importance and relevance of this initiative to our local community, therefore be it resolved that Niagara Regional Council take meaningful action towards a greener and more sustainable future by supporting this motion and allocating the necessary resources to plant a microforest on the land used for the new water reservoir in Grimsby. All in favor? That's carried. Up next, we have 5 notices of motion from Councillor Sharwak. Councillor, please read your motions. Oh,
No, it's 5. It was
It's
amended.
5.
The council agenda was amended, approved as.
Okay. Can I get started? Okay, thank you. So I'll read them in order. The first one is Integrity Commissioner Complaint Process, Informal Process, where Section 223.21 of the Municipal Act 2001, SO 2001 C25 authorizes a municipality to establish codes of conduct for members of council of the municipality and of local boards of the municipality. And whereas the town of Grimsby established bylaw 2074 to establish such codes of conduct, and where the town of Grimsby and its taxpayers have incurred excessive integrity commissioner costs exceeding budget requirements in its 2018-2022 term as a result of formal integrity commissioner complaints among members of council, and whereas an informal complaint process is noted in bylaw 2074 and offers similar benefits of dispute resolution as an informal complaint but with minimal expenses, and whereas bylaw 2074 encourages individuals to pursue the informal complaint procedure as a means of stopping and remedying the behavior of activity that is inconsistent with the code of conduct. However, it is not a precondition or a prerequisite that the complainant pursue the informal complaint procedure prior to pursuing the formal complaint procedure. Therefore, be it resolved that bylaw 2074 be amended to make filing an informal complaint a precondition or prerequisite as a first step prior to pursuing a formal complaint. Formal complaints cannot be filed until an informal complaint has been filed and concluded. I acknowledge that this notice of motion will be given consideration at the April 18th, 2024 council meeting. Number 2, Integrity Commissioner Complaint Process Timeline. Whereas Section 223.21 of the Municipal Act 2001, SO 2001 C25 authorizes a municipality to establish codes of conduct for members of council of the municipality and of local boards of the municipality, and whereas the town of Grimsby established bylaw 2074 to establish such codes of conduct, and whereas bylaw 2074 requires a council member provide a response within 10 days, and whereas bylaw 2074 does not restrict council members from filing complaints against one council member at the same time, and whereas bylaw 2074 does not restrict council members from filing multiple complaints at the same time, and whereas bylaw 2074 does not formally give consideration of process extensions for major holidays such as Christmas, and whereas 10 days to provide a response to multiple complaints during major holidays for council members with families, full-time employment, and commitments outside of council is not sufficient and causes undue stress. Therefore, be it resolved that bylaw 2074 be amended to process complaints from start to finish in sequence before a new complaint begins the process, that the period to respond is be done sequentially, and all complaints must be resolved before a new complaint begins. I acknowledge that this notice of motion will be given consideration at the April 18th, 2024 council meeting. Oh, okay, April 15th, okay, they all say. Okay, all good. Thank you. And the next 3 were all in response to calls that I received last week from residents. First one being lights in parks. Whereas the town of Grimsby strive to ensure safety of Grimsby residents, Grimsby businesses, and their properties, and whereas the town of Grimsby has experienced an ongoing rise in crime linked to vandalism, theft, and break-ins, and whereas the town of Grimsby is vulnerable to crime due to its proximity to the QEW as an escape route, and whereas the town of Grimsby is further vulnerable to criminal activity due to redirection of Niagara Regional Police resources outside of Grimsby, and whereas local parks with minimal to no lighting are often locations where vandalism and crime occur, and whereas parks with adequate lighting may deter unwanted behaviors and crimes from occurring, therefore be it resolved that community services explore the installation of motion-censored lights in parks experiencing a high degree of unwanted behaviors and crime, particularly the Olive Street Princess Park. Be it further resolved that community services provide a report to council on the installation of motion sensor lighting in parks experiencing a high degree of unwanted behaviors and crime. I acknowledge that this notice of motion will be given consideration at the April 15th, 2024 council meeting. Number 4, long-term care homes. Whereas the Town of Grimsby Council 2022-2026 identified a high quality of life, specifically improving the health and safety of residents as strategic priorities, And whereas the town of Grimsby currently has 3 licensed long-term care homes providing 134 licensed beds for community members in need of long-term care, and whereas Ontario Health on March 4th, 2024 reported a shortfall of 430 waitlisted for a long-term care home in Grimsby, and whereas the town of Grimsby is experiencing significant population growth, which will continue to strain the resources of the healthcare system, including Killian Lodge, Deer Park Villa, Shalom Manor, and West Lincoln Memorial Hospital, and whereas the deficit in licensed care beds will continue to increase as in proportion to population growth, and whereas the province of Ontario has responded to the needs of the community with the rebuild of the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital, and whereas the province of Ontario can continue to show great care for our community with the construction of a new long-term care home, and whereas there may be potential to acquire property in Grimsby that offers an ideal location for the addition of a long-term care home. Therefore, be it resolved that the town of Grimsby communicate its desire to investigate partnership opportunities with the province of Ontario to take possession of property in Grimsby with the intention to construct a new long-term care home at the location. Be it further resolved that the notice of interest be circulated to Samuel Oosterhoff, Niagara West MPP, Niagara Region Public Health, the Honourable Sylvia Jones, Minister of Health and Deputy Premier of Ontario, the Honourable Raymond Sung Jun Chow, Minister for Seniors and Accessibility, and the Honourable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario. I acknowledge that this notice of motion will be given consideration at the April 15th, 2024 Council meeting. Last one, Niagara Regional Transit. Whereas the town of Grimsby provides public transportation to its residents through NRT On Demand, and whereas NRT On Demand is a well-used service by members of our community, particularly those unable to drive, and whereas NRT On Demand is often used by Grimsby residents for medical appointments which require consistent, reliable pickups and drop-offs, and whereas NRT On Demand riders have often reported late or canceled pickups and drop-offs, difficulty booking rides verbally or in simple, accessible format, and not having accessible tools provided for those in need, example, ensuring a metal stool is available for those at the curb, and whereas Grimsby residents using NRT On Demand expect and require consistent, reliable, and accessible transportation when booking services. Therefore, be it resolved that the town of Grimsby communicate to Niagara Regional Transit the immediate changes necessary to ensure consistent, reliable, and accessible transportation for Grimsby residents, especially those using the service for important appointments. Be it further resolved that the Niagara Regional Transit provide a report to council speaking to the issues and changes made to address customer service, accessibility, and reliability of pickup and drop-off, and present the report to Grimsby Council. I acknowledge that this notice of motion will be given consideration at the April 15, 2024 council meeting. Thank you.
All right, next we move to a proclamation from the Canadian Viral Hepatitis Elimination Day. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Bradsey, second by Councillor Vardy. Moved by Councillor Bradsey, second by Councillor Vardy, whereas hepatitis B and C are among Canada's most burdensome infectious diseases, measured in liver damage, cancer, lives lost, and significant costs to our public health care system, and whereas more than 204,000 people in Canada are living with hepatitis C, and more than 250,000 are living with hepatitis B, and where hepatitis C is curable and hepatitis B is vaccine preventable and treatable, and whereas Canada has committed to eliminating viral hepatitis as a public health threat by 2030, and whereas Canadian Viral Hepatitis Elimination Day provides an opportunity to highlight the need for policies that support easy access to testing, treatment, and care for those affected, paving the way toward elimination. Therefore, I, Jeff Jordan, Mayor of the Town of Grimsby, do hereby proclaim May 9th, 2024 Canadian Viral Hepatitis Elimination Day in Grimsby. All in favor? That's carried. Up next, we have Township of Clearview endorsement of Bill C-63. Councillor Charwa has requested to endorse a resolution from the Township of Clearview on the endorsement of Bill C-63 in the House of Commons. Councillor Charwa is the mover. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Korstanji? Moved by Councillor Charwa, second by Councillor Korstanji. Resolved that council support the Township of Clearview's resolution regarding endorsement of Bill C-63 in the House of Commons. All in favor? That's carried. Up next, we have bylaws. Can I get a mover and seconder to pass the bylaws? Moved by Councillor Howe, second by Councillor Sharwa. Moved by Councillor Howe, second by Councillor Sharwa. Resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaws 24-19 to 24-2021, in 24-21 inclusive, and the same be read a first time, considered, and passed. All in favor? That's carried. The next council meeting is scheduled for April 15th, 2024 at 6:30 PM. Can I get a mover and seconder to pass the confirming bylaw? Moved by Councillor Bradzi, second by Councillor Korstanji. Moved by Councillor Bradzi, second by Councillor Korstanji. Resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaw 24-22 and that same be read a first time, considered, and passed. All in favor? That's carried. Good evening, everyone. Meeting is adjourned. Have a good night.